Hello folks, and I'm delighted to be bringing you this new wind controller from the French company Aodyo, and this is called the Sylphio. Now there are quite a few wind controllers on the market at the moment. I've done quite a few videos recently showcasing, the Roland models, the new Akai models, and of course the big hitting Yamaha YDS 150. But this really is a wind controller with a difference. I mean, for a start, check out its nice compact size and its wonderful aesthetic here, this kind of mysterious black thing, which I'm going to explain to you all about in the coming 5-10 minutes or so. But the basic gen with this is that it really simulates the kind of real playing experience that one has when you play a wind instrument, whether it's a saxophone, a flute, a clarinet, even a trumpet or a tuba. It's got that real sensation of passing air through the instrument, because we obviously have this mouthpiece up here, but there is an entire tube running all the way through the end, and you soon know about it because you feel the dribble coming straight out the other side of it. So the basic idea, as I say, it sort of simulates that real playing experience of a wind instrument, but it really fuses it with kind of modern synthesizer technology, allowing incredible expressive possibilities, and I hope you just got a bit of an insight there from my introduction. So to give you some insight as to the basics before I go into some detail, we're looking here at a unit that is completely rechargeable. So it's USB connectivity at the back, takes about 8 hours to charge, and then you've got a 6-hour lifespan with it. That's the first thing. It's also got the potential to connect to a wireless receiver, so I'll bring that element in a bit. It's basically a wireless receiver that Aodyo makes specifically for this, called the Link, and it has a lot of potential and connectivity as well, so I'll go into that in a bit. It's got 30 onboard sounds, and each one is really layered with many kind of nuances and interesting aspects to it. It's got a 4-octave range. If I turn it around, you may just about see the kind of octave selectors here at the back. And it's just got massive additional expressive kind of possibilities. So it's not just a case of fingering notes and hearing a sound, but there's all sorts of different things you can do, from creating vibrato to actually moving the instrument about in the air and it having these kind of sensors that detect an inertial kind of movement. So you get these sort of multiple layers of expressive possibilities within it. And then also within it, it's got the possibility to set to multiple fingering possibilities. So you've got, I think it actually defaults to a recorder fingering setup, and then you've got saxophone fingerings, clarinet, trumpet, flute. I've actually just got it set here to the recorder fingering because it's actually very similar to saxophone fingering, and there's a few little alternatives you need to know about, which I will go into in a bit. But in the meantime, what I'm just going to do is take you through some of the sounds, because I know that the main thing you guys are probably keen to know about is how does the thing sound. So you heard one sound there at the beginning. I think that was sound 27, called Da Funk. So I'm just going to scroll through a few sounds so you can get a bit of an idea of the sound before I go into some more detail. Okay, so this is sound number 1, MacGuffin. Daphne flute, sound number 2. This one is called House of Chords. Now this one's interesting because, so there's a regular sound, but if I move my thumb on the slider below, which I'll get into in a bit, so you can hear I'm scrolling through different chord types there, minor chords, major chords, seventh chords, augmented chords and all sorts. So that's an interesting one, and I think takes some practice in terms of understanding exactly where your thumb is on the slider so you can depict a specific chord, if you like. So let's move on to the next sound. This is called Meow. And Sync Asset, number 5. Korobori, number 7. Okay, I don't know about you, but that sounds like you're stuck halfway up Everest and there's a howling gale outside your tent. Okay, on to the next one. Well, there's quite a few. I can't actually pronounce the names. Some very French-sounding names here. I don't want to make a fool of myself. Let's try Chameleon Bass, number 9. I love a wind controller when they produce a really nice bass sound, because it's not all about playing melodies when we have a wind controller. Sometimes you can play the bass line, and that's kind of a rare joy for a sax player to be able to sort of be in control of a really great bass sound like that. So I love that one. What else have we got? Electrofuse, number 7. That's quite nice. Okay, this is Vocabot, number 16. Whoa, that one's a lot of fun. So you get the idea. I mean, I demonstrated about a third of the sounds there, I suppose. There are so many layers of kind of tonality and nuance in each sound, which just makes them interesting in their own right. But beyond that, I was starting to showcase some of the kind of features of this instrument. So I mentioned in my intro, you can do more than just playing a straight note and enjoying the sound of it. So if I turn it round on the back here, under the right thumb, we've got this thing that they call the slider, which has sort of multi-functions really, depending on the sound that you've selected. So in some cases, you can slide your thumb down and you can have a portamento effect, a tone drop, if you like. And in other cases, you can actually vary the kind of timbre of the sound, where you can take out sort of certain frequencies and give it a different sound altogether. So that's the slider. The other thing that you can do, that you've seen me do a couple of times, is you can elevate it, and then the sound will completely change. In some cases, you put a high-pass filter into the sound. Let's see if it does it on this one. There you go. So it gives a real sort of visually dramatic effect when you're actually performing. And then the other thing you can do is you can roll it from left to right. You can hear that sort of closes off the sound, which is quite interesting. And then another thing that it does is you've got vibrato, which you can just, well, you have to produce the vibrato in a slightly different way to usual. As per with some of the other wind synthesizers, you sort of have an up and down kind of embouchure thing, which feels a bit odd. And in some ways, it's a little odd with this as well. So it's a kind of shaking in and out of the mouth, and as you could hear there, I sort of varied the speed of it, and that varies the speed of the vibrato. So again, it's got a very kind of physical, kind of obvious connection with the audience. They can see what you're actually doing, and they make a connection with the sound that you're producing. So when you actually layer all these things together, it's really interesting. The possibilities become quite extreme. Now, just a sort of general thing about it, really. You may be wondering, as sax players, because clearly this is a saxophone channel, what is the sort of connection to saxophones here? Well, okay, yes, there's a set of saxophone fingerings, which I've employed here, and like I mentioned earlier on, you can also adjust it for other instruments, trumpet and all the other wind instruments. But really, as sax players, I wouldn't necessarily see this as something that you're looking to substitute your saxophone playing with and use as a practice aid to increase your saxophone technical ability. It really should be seen as an instrument in its own right, with its own kind of expressive capabilities. It's not trying to go for saxophone sounds, like for example the Yamaha YDS 150, which is going for a whole different thing there. It's very much a synthesizer, but with the experience of and the sort of feeling that you have when you're blowing down a wind instrument. Now, oddly enough, even though this looks like an innocent little thing, I find it physically quite tiring compared to playing the saxophone. So my first kind of criticism would be that out of the box, when you just play it after 2 or 3 minutes blowing on this thing, it's actually quite tiring. I mean, I'd say the bore, which is a cylindrical kind of tube that runs all the way from here to here, is quite open, and specifically it's quite open at this mouthpiece point. So what I've actually done just to reduce that resistance and kind of take away that kind of dizziness feeling that I get just after a few minutes of playing, you may have spotted this by now, but I've actually got a piece of blue tack in the end here, which I know you're thinking, oh, why are we already doing something bizarre with a brand new item like this, putting a piece of blue tack in it? That is very lo-fi indeed. But actually it does work, and I got this recommendation straight from the manufacturer. They are actually in the process of manufacturing little plastic pips that you can insert in the end here, and I think there's going to be sort of 2 or 3 levels of them to vary the resistance depending on what you're looking for. It's probably a little bit more akin to playing a flute without the blue tack. It's kind of the feeling of passing a lot of air. Certainly makes me feel dizzy every time I play the flute. Anyway, I've kind of got it just right now with this blue tack here. But I suppose the flip side of the argument that I'm making is, unlike some of the other wind controllers out there, where really they just rely on a breath sensor and that the air is going nowhere, it's just sort of getting blocked inside, those other wind controllers kind of feel like you're just holding onto your breath, and it's all about triggering sensors inside it. So it's sort of got a bit of an artificial, they can have a bit of an artificial flavour to them. Whereas with this one, it's nice, that sensation of passing the air all the way through it, so it feels more realistic, the whole thing that Sylphio are going for. So I really like that aspect. And the only other thing I would sort of say in terms of a slight critical element would be on the fingering side of things. At first, when I get it out the box and I'm just trying to work out where my fingers are going, even in the saxophone mode, you realise straight away that you're actually missing an E flat key. So there's your D, normally it would be down here, and there's your bottom C key. So at first I thought, oh, perhaps this is the E flat key. Now I believe you can change this C key to operate as an E flat key, but of course then you're missing your bottom C key. But Silphio have cleverly made this G sharp key here function also as an E flat key, and also it functions as a bottom C sharp key. So I'll see if I can just play you a chromatic briefly. Okay, so that was a chromatic from C, and I've just got stuck on a B flat here, and you'll notice that I'm using a long B flat fingering because that is the main B flat that is open to us as sax players. Now, of course, we're used to playing this B flat as a sax player, but I bet most of us, sort of 90% of the time, use the bis key or the side B flat. Well, there are no side keys on this. So perhaps my criticism would be, it's a shame that we're missing some of those chromatics because we can't get as technical. We can't play those sort of fluid phrases that we used to playing. That's how I felt about it a few months ago, but recently I've kind of come round to the way of thinking that this, again, as I said before, is an instrument in its own right. It's not about necessarily playing, your favourite John Coltrane phrase on this thing. It is a lot harder to do without those sort of alternative fingerings. But instead, it just becomes a really interesting expressive device. You have got all the chromatics there, you can work with it, you can just sort of treat it like a new instrument to be learned from scratch, if you like, utilising your wind skills. And for me, this instrument just sounds better when you're playing in a kind of more ethereal style, anyway, as you can hear from the kind of sounds it produces. So think of it in that vein, I would say, overall. Okay, so that's my sort of 2 main points that I wanted to raise in terms of my initial criticisms. In fact, I've sort of answered them both there. I think the sounds are great overall. I mean, you've heard some of them there. They're really layered with different elements to them. They're really interesting. It sort of sets it apart from the other wind synthesizers in that sense. Connectivity-wise, I mentioned that I would talk about that a little bit. Over to my right there is a little box called the Link, which I will just get for you now. So here we are. This is the Sylphio Link. That's the back of it. That's the front of it. And this is basically a wireless receiver that doubles as a MIDI controller. So we've been using it for this video just so that I can play wirelessly. The only cable coming out of the Silphio has been my headphones, so I can monitor that way. But otherwise, on the back of it, what we've got is, there is a phone socket if you want to monitor the headphones from the wireless unit. We've got a line in here, standard stereo line out, both jacks. We've got a MIDI in and out if you want to start kind of controlling, you know, doors and all the rest of it. As an alternative, there's a USB for controlling a sound module that way, and then there's just a power supply there. And in order to pair up to your device, there's a couple of buttons on the front that you just hold simultaneously, and you see this sort of light flashing, and that's the way that it actually links to the unit. It's nice and lightweight, and it's just a very nice, satisfying object. And yeah, I mean, it's these days, a lot of these Wind controllers are being designed as wireless units, and it just makes the whole playing experience that much more pleasurable, makes you actually want to get into it. You're not sort of dragging wires everywhere. So that's a really nice touch from Aodyo there, the wireless link. So overall, I think you've got my conclusions from my spiel throughout this video, but I'm just really impressed with this new Wind controller. I say new, it's actually been around for a few years, so I'm just excited to be finally bringing you a video on it. I think I didn't show you the LCD display before, so let's just give you a little bit of a flavour of that. You can see what's going on there. There's all sorts of facilities for scrolling down using the slider down here, or using these keys here if you want to change the settings, change the sound. It's fairly intuitive. It doesn't actually come with a massive instruction manual, to be honest, and there's various resources you can look up online. But as I say, it's fairly intuitive. So once you realise that you press this special button on the front, which is the kind of link to controlling the whole thing and changing all the settings, you realise that it's fairly easy just to get on with it. So yeah, in conclusion, I think this is a really exciting new instrument. The sounds are kind of off the charts. It plays wirelessly. What more do you want? So come down to our store, check it out. This is the Silphio. That was quite a workout. So I am delighted to be... Oh, it's still talking to me. How can I stop this? Yeah, that shut it up. Oh no, it's not. Stop. Stop. I tell you, stop now. Right, if I keep it very still, hopefully it'll behave. So I'm delighted to introduce the new... I don't know if I can do that.